Apologize to my woman, now." The deep, commanding voice cut through the party noise like a blade through silk. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she stood there, sticky Pepsi dripping from her burgundy dress, the humiliation burning her cheeks crimson. Her ex-boyfriend Jake had just thrown his drink at her in front of everyone at this upscale charity gala, calling her pathetic for daring to show her face after their messy breakup. But now, a man she'd never seen before, tall, devastatingly handsome, with steel-gray eyes and an aura of dangerous authority, had stepped between them. "Hey, just before we continue, please go down and press the subscribe button so I can prove to my mom that I can do this. Thank you." His perfectly tailored black suit screamed money and power, and the way everyone in their vicinity suddenly went quiet told Sarah this wasn't just any party guest. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Jake stammered, his earlier bravado crumbling under the stranger's icy stare. "Someone you don't want to cross," the man replied, his voice carrying a subtle Italian accent that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "You have 10 seconds to apologize to the lady, or we're going to have a problem." Sarah's mind reeled. This gorgeous, powerful stranger was defending her. After 3 years of Jake's emotional abuse and manipulation, someone was actually standing up for her? She clutched her small purse tighter, watching this scene unfold like something from one of those romance novels she secretly devoured late at night. The mystery man turned slightly toward her, his expression softening just a fraction. "Are you hurt, Bella?" That accent, those eyes. Sarah felt something stir inside her that she hadn't felt in years. I'm fine," she managed to whisper, though she was anything but fine. Her dress was ruined, her dignity shattered, and now this impossibly attractive stranger was looking at her like she was precious china. 5 seconds, the man said, turning back to Jake with renewed menace. Jake's face had gone pale. He looked around desperately, as if seeking help from the other party guests, but everyone had mysteriously found somewhere else to be. The charity gala, which had been buzzing with conversation just moments before, now felt like a scene from a movie where the villain was about to get his comeuppance. "Look, man, this is between me and my girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," Sarah found her voice, surprising herself with its strength. "We've been broken up for 6 months, Jake." The stranger's lips curved into what might have been approval. "You heard the lady. Ex, which means you have no business throwing drinks at her or calling her names. Time's up." What happened next would replay in Sarah's mind for weeks afterward. The mysterious man didn't raise his voice or make any dramatic gestures. He simply took 1 step closer to Jake and said something too quietly for Sarah to hear. Whatever it was made Jake's eyes widen with terror. "I'm sorry," Jake blurted out, looking directly at Sarah. "Sarah, I'm really sorry. I was out of line." "Completely out of line." The transformation was remarkable. Jake, who had spent 3 years making Sarah feel small and worthless, who had cheated on her twice and convinced her it was somehow her fault, was now practically trembling as he backed away. "Get out of here," the stranger said quietly, and Jake didn't need to be told twice. He practically ran toward the exit, pushing past startled guests in his haste to leave. Sarah stood frozen, processing what had just happened. The party gradually returned to its normal volume, conversations resuming as if nothing had occurred, but she could feel curious eyes on them from every direction. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at her savior. Up close, he was even more striking, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair swept back perfectly, a strong jaw, and those mesmerizing gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. "I don't know how to repay you." "No need for repayment," he said, his voice gentler now. "But you should get cleaned up. Come with me." It should have been a red flag, following a stranger somewhere private. Sarah had always been cautious, practical Sarah who double-checked locks and never talked to strangers. But something about this man made her feel safer than she had in years, even as her pulse quickened with awareness of him. He led her through the crowded ballroom of the luxury hotel where the charity gala was being held, past ice sculptures and elegantly dressed donors, to a private elevator that required a keycard. The doors slid shut, enclosing them in intimate silence. "I'm Sarah," she said, suddenly nervous. Sarah Mitchell. Marco, he replied, studying her with those intense eyes. Marco Rossetti. The name sent a chill of recognition through her, though she couldn't place why. It sounded familiar, like something she'd heard on the news or read in the newspaper. But standing this close to him in the small elevator, breathing in his expensive cologne, and feeling the heat radiating from his powerful frame, she found it hard to think clearly. The elevator opened to reveal a hallway that definitely wasn't part of the hotel's public areas. Everything was more luxurious here. Marble floors, crystal sconces, the kind of quiet that came with serious money and influence. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, a flutter of nervousness mixing with excitement in her stomach. "My suite," Marco said simply. "I keep rooms here for business purposes. You can clean up, and I'll have someone bring you a new dress." His suite turned out to be a penthouse that probably cost more per night than Sarah made in a month at her job as a marketing coordinator. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, and the furnishings looked like something from a high-end magazine. "The bathroom is through there," Marco said, gesturing toward a doorway. "Take your time. I'll make some calls about getting you something to wear." As Sarah cleaned the sticky soda from her skin and hair, she caught glimpses of herself in the massive mirror. Her cheeks were still flushed, her eyes bright with an emotion she couldn't name. When was the last time someone had protected her like that? When was the last time she'd felt this alive? She emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a plush robe to find Marco standing by the windows, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in rapid Italian, his voice low and commanding. Even not understanding the words, Sarah could tell this was a man accustomed to giving orders and having them followed without question. He ended the call and turned to her, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin tingle. "Better?" "Much," Sarah said, suddenly very aware that she was wearing nothing but a hotel robe in a strange man's suite. "Thank you. Really. What you did downstairs, no one's ever stood up for me like that." Something flickered in Marco's eyes. Anger, maybe, or pity. "That man? Your ex? He treats you badly often?" Sarah's instinct was to downplay it, to make excuses for Jake the way she had for 3 years. But something about Marco's direct gaze made her want to be honest. "He wasn't physically abusive or anything, just he had a way of making me feel worthless, like I was lucky he put up with me." Marco's jaw tightened. Men like that prey on women with kind hearts. They sense goodness and try to crush it because it highlights their own inadequacy. The insight was so accurate it took Sarah's breath away. "You sound like you've seen it before." "In my line of work, I encounter all types of people. I've learned to read them quickly." "What do you do?" Sarah asked, curious about this mysterious man who commanded such respect and fear. Marco was quiet for a moment, pouring himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "Import and export. Family business. We deal with challenging clients sometimes." Before Sarah could ask more questions, there was a discreet knock at the door. Marco answered it, returning with several garment bags and shoeboxes. "I had my assistant contact some boutiques," he said. "She guessed your size from the security footage. Hopefully something fits." Sarah stared at the designer labels with wide eyes. "I can't accept this. These probably cost more than my rent." "You can't go back to the party in a hotel robe," Marco pointed out reasonably. "Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better." The dresses were gorgeous, elegant cocktail dresses in jewel tones that would complement her auburn hair and fair complexion. Sarah selected a deep emerald green number that hugged her curves in all the right places, paired with strappy heels that made her legs look miles long. When she emerged from the bedroom, Marco's reaction was everything a woman could hope for. His eyes darkened as they traveled over her, and she heard his sharp intake of breath. "Beautiful," he murmured, approaching her slowly. "Absolutely beautiful." Sarah felt heat bloom in her cheeks and lower, in places that had been dormant for far too long. Jake had never looked at her like this, like she was a goddess he wanted to worship. "We should go back to the party," she said softly, though the last thing she wanted was to leave this private cocoon they'd created. "Should we?" Marco asked, stopping just inches from her. close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, smell his intoxicating cologne. "What if I'd rather keep you all to myself?" The words sent liquid fire through her veins. This was dangerous territory. She barely knew this man, despite the fact that he'd rescued her and was now looking at her like she hung the moon. But for once in her life, Sarah wanted to be reckless, wanted to see where this electricity between them might lead. "I don't even know you," she whispered, but she didn't step away. "What would you like to know?" Marco asked, lifting one hand to cup her cheek. His thumb traced her lower lip, making her breath catch. "Everything," Sarah admitted, "starting with why everyone downstairs seemed afraid of you." Marco's smile was enigmatic. "Not everyone fears me, Bella. Only those with reason to." "And Jake had reason to?" "Any man who would humiliate a woman in public has reason to fear me," Marco said simply. "I don't tolerate disrespect toward ladies, especially not beautiful ones in emerald dresses." His thumb was still tracing patterns on her skin, and Sarah felt herself leaning into his touch. This was madness. She'd known this man for less than 2 hours, and already she was contemplating things that would have scandalized her conservative upbringing. "Dance with me," Marco said suddenly. "There's no music." In response, Marco pulled out his phone and selected something slow and romantic. Italian words flowed through the room as he held out his hand to her. Sarah placed her palm in his, gasping softly at the electric contact. Marco pulled her into his arms, one hand settling at the small of her back, the other holding her fingers gently. They moved together slowly, and Sarah marveled at how perfectly she fit against him, how natural this felt despite the surreal circumstances. "Tell me about yourself, Sarah Mitchell," Marco said as they swayed together. "What makes you happy? What are your dreams?" It had been so long since anyone had asked her about her dreams. "I used to want to travel," she admitted. "See the world, experience different cultures. But life got in the way. Life, or Jake?" The question hit uncomfortably close to home. Jake thought traveling was a waste of money. Said I should be practical, focus on building a stable life here. Marco's arms tightened around her fractionally. "And what do you think?" "I think..." Sarah paused, surprised by her own honesty. "I think I let him convince me to make myself smaller, safer, more convenient for him." "And now?" Sarah looked up into Marco's intense gaze. "Now I'm dancing with a mysterious stranger in a penthouse suite, wearing a dress that costs more than my car. I'd say I'm done playing it safe." Something shifted in Marco's expression. Heat, approval, and something deeper that made Sarah's heart skip. "Good," he said roughly. "Safe is overrated." The song changed to something even more seductive, and Marco spun her slowly before pulling her back against his chest. Sarah could feel the solid warmth of him, the carefully controlled strength in his hands. Everything about this man screamed danger and excitement, the exact opposite of the predictable, soul-crushing relationship she'd just escaped. "I should tell you," Marco said, his voice rumbling against her ear. "I'm not a safe man, Sarah. My world, it's complicated, dangerous sometimes." A smart woman would have asked for details, would have demanded explanations and references, and a full background check. But Sarah found herself pressing closer instead, drawn to the darkness in his voice like a moth to flame. "Are you warning me away?" she asked. "I'm giving you a chance to leave before you get in too deep." Sarah tilted her head back to meet his gaze. "What if I don't want to leave?" The words hung between them, loaded with possibility and promise. Marco studied her face intently, as if trying to read her soul. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him, because his hand slid up to tangle in her hair. "Then stay," he said simply, and kissed her. The kiss was everything Sarah had been missing without even knowing it. Passionate, but controlled. Demanding, yet reverent. Marco kissed her like she was precious, like she was his, and Sarah melted into him completely. Her hands fisted in his expensive shirt, pulling him closer as years of emotional starvation finally found sustenance. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Sarah felt dizzy, overwhelmed by sensations she'd forgotten she was capable of feeling. "Stay tonight," Marco said against her lips. "Let me show you how a man should treat a woman like you." Every rational part of Sarah's brain screamed warnings. She didn't do one-night stands. She didn't follow mysterious men to hotel suites. She was careful, cautious Sarah, who read the fine print and always wore sensible shoes. But tonight, she was Sarah, who looked stunning in emerald green. Sarah, who had been rescued by a knight in an Armani suit. Sarah, who deserved to feel desired and protected and cherished. "Yes," she whispered. Marco's smile was triumphant and tender at once. He swept her up in his arms, carrying her toward the bedroom like she weighed nothing at all. Sarah laughed, surprising herself with the sound. When was the last time she'd laughed from pure joy? "What's funny, Bella?" "I was just thinking," Sarah said, wrapping her arms around his neck. 6 hours ago, I thought my night was ruined. Now I feel like Cinderella." "Then I suppose that makes me your Prince Charming," Marco said, settling her, carefully on the massive bed. "Prince Charming never felt dangerous," Sarah observed, reaching up to loosen his tie. Marco caught her hands, bringing them to his lips to press kisses to her palms. The best fairy tales always have a little danger, don't they? Beauty and the Beast. The Little Mermaid. Sometimes a woman needs a man with a dark side to show her how bright her light really shines. The poetry in his words made Sarah's heart flutter. This man was full of contradictions, commanding but gentle, dangerous but protective. She was beginning to understand that Marco Rossetti was unlike any man she'd ever encountered. He made love to her with a passion and reverence that brought tears to her eyes. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered endearment in Italian made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. This was what she'd been missing, what she'd convinced herself didn't really exist. This complete worship of her body and soul. Afterward, as they lay tangled in silk sheets with the city lights painting patterns on their skin, Sarah traced lazy circles on Marco's chest. "I should probably ask what happens now," she said softly. Marco's arms tightened around her. "What do you want to happen?" "Honestly, I want this to be real. I want to wake up tomorrow and find out this wasn't all a dream. But I'm scared." "Of me?" Sarah considered the question seriously. By all logic, she should be terrified. She was in bed with a man who had effortlessly intimidated her ex-boyfriend, who clearly moved in circles far above her middle-class existence, who had admitted his world was dangerous. "No," she said finally. "I'm not scared of you. I'm scared of how you make me feel. I'm scared of wanting something this badly." Marco rolled over, bracing himself above her so he could look into her eyes. "Sarah Mitchell, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Tonight changed something for me. I've met a lot of women, but none like you. You're not leaving my life tomorrow or any other day, if I have anything to say about it." The possessive declaration should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through her again. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're mine now," Marco said simply, "and I take very good care of what belongs to me." Over the following weeks, Sarah discovered what it meant to be claimed by Marco Rossetti. He courted her like a man from another era, flowers delivered to her office daily, expensive dinners at restaurants she'd only read about, weekend trips to his family's vineyard in Napa. But it was the smaller gestures that really won her heart. The way he listened intently when she talked about her work. How he remembered that she preferred tea to coffee, and always had her favorite blend waiting. The protective way his hand settled on her lower back when they walked together, claiming her as his for all the world to see. Sarah began to piece together that Marco's family business was more complex than simple import and export. The expensive cars, the men in suits who appeared whenever he called, the way restaurant owners and hotel managers fell over themselves to accommodate him. It all painted a picture of significant influence and power. She also began to understand that Marco hadn't been exaggerating about the dangerous aspects of his world. There were late-night phone calls in rapid Italian that left him tense and distracted. Security measures that seemed excessive for a legitimate businessman. Warnings to always let him know where she was going and when she'd be back. The revelation came 6 weeks after that first night, when Sarah arrived at Marco's downtown office for a lunch date and overheard him on a phone call. "No, Antonio. We don't negotiate with people who try to muscle in on our territory," Marco was saying, his voice cold and lethal. "Make sure they understand that their little protection racket ends now, or they'll be dealing with more than just a conversation." Sarah froze in the doorway, pieces finally clicking into place. The fear in Jake's eyes, the way people deferred to Marco, the careful way he'd described his business. Marco Rossetti wasn't just wealthy and influential. He was connected to organized crime. When Marco noticed her standing there, his expression immediately shifted to concern. "Sarah, how long have you been there?" "Long enough," she said quietly, stepping into his office and closing the door behind her. "We need to talk." Marco dismissed his associate with a gesture, then moved around his desk to approach her carefully, as if she were a skittish animal who might bolt. "What did you hear?" "Enough to confirm what I've been suspecting," Sarah said. "You're not just in import and export, are you?" Marco was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "No," he said finally. "I'm not." The simple admission hung between them. Sarah had expected denials, explanations, attempts to convince her she'd misunderstood. The direct honesty was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. "Are you going to tell me the truth now?" she asked. Marco moved to the windows overlooking the city, his hands clasped behind his back. "My family has been in this business for 4 generations. We handle security and logistics for various enterprises, some legal, some less so. We protect what needs protecting, resolve disputes that can't be handled through conventional channels. You're talking about the Mafia. That's a crude term that people use when they don't understand the complexities of what we do," Marco said. "But essentially, yes." Sarah sank into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, her mind reeling. "So, when you defended me that night—" "I was being a gentleman," Marco said firmly, turning to face her. "What I did for you had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with the fact that I couldn't stand to see you hurt." "And now? These past weeks?" Marco moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. "Now I'm completely in love with you, and I'm terrified you're going to run." The words hit her like a physical blow. Love. This powerful, dangerous man loved her. "Marco, I know it's complicated," he said urgently. "I know my world isn't what you signed up for. But Sarah, what we have is real. It's the most real thing in my life. Don't let fear take that away from us." Sarah looked down at their joined hands, his large and strong and capable of violence, hers small and soft and trembling with emotion. "I need time to think." The pain that flashed across Marco's features nearly broke her heart. "Of course. Take all the time you need." That night, Sarah lay awake in her own apartment for the first time in weeks, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything she'd learned. Marco Rossetti was a criminal, a member of organized crime, a man who solved problems through intimidation, and possibly worse. He was also the man who had defended her honor when no one else would, who made her feel beautiful and cherished and protected, who had shown her what real love could feel like. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Whatever you decide, know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. M." Sarah closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. How had her safe, predictable life become so complicated? The answer came the next morning when she found Jake waiting by her car in the parking garage of her apartment building. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, desperate. "Sarah, thank God," he said, approaching her quickly. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Jake," Sarah said, instinctively backing away. "We're done. Have been for months." That's what I thought too, until I found out who you've been seeing, Jake said, his voice taking on the manipulative tone she remembered so well. Sarah, do you have any idea how dangerous Marco Rossetti is? What he's capable of? Despite everything, Sarah felt her spine straighten defensively. That's none of your business. Isn't it? I care about you, Sarah. I know I screwed up, but I can't stand by and watch you destroy your life for some criminal. You humiliated me in public and called me pathetic, Sarah said coldly. Don't pretend this is about caring. Jake's mask slipped slightly, revealing the controlling man underneath. Fine. You want the truth? I've been doing some research on your boyfriend. Do you know what the Rossetti family is involved in? Murder, Sarah. Extortion. Drug trafficking. Is that really the life you want? Each word hit like a physical blow, but Sarah forced herself to remain calm. What I want is for you to leave me alone. I can't do that, Jake said, grabbing her arm. Not when you're making such a huge mistake. Come home with me, Sarah. We can work things out. Go back to the way things were. The way things were. Sarah remembered the woman she'd been 6 weeks ago. Small, afraid, convinced she deserved nothing better than Jake's crumbs of affection. Then she thought of the woman she'd become in Marco's arms. Confident, desired, protected. Let go of me, she said quietly. Sarah, be reasonable. Let go of me, Sarah repeated, her voice stronger now. I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm not going back to anything with you. What Marco and I have is none of your business. Jake's grip tightened painfully. You think he actually cares about you? You think you're special? Women like you are disposable to men like him. The cruel words triggered every insecurity Sarah had ever harbored, every fear that she wasn't worthy of real love. For a moment, she wavered. Then she remembered Marco's hands on her skin, his voice whispering Italian endearments, the way he looked at her like she was his whole world. You're wrong, she said firmly, and you're pathetic. Trying to scare me back to you because you can't stand that I found someone better. Jake's face twisted with rage, and for a moment Sarah thought he might actually strike her. Then a familiar voice cut through the tension. I believe the lady asked you to let go. Marco emerged from behind a pillar, flanked by 2 men in dark suits. He looked calm, almost casual, but Sarah could see the lethal promise in his eyes. Jake dropped her arm like it was on fire, his face going pale. We were just talking. Looked more like harassment to me, Marco said conversationally, approaching slowly. Sarah, are you all right? I'm fine, Sarah said, though her heart was racing. She hadn't called Marco, hadn't even known he was there. How had he... As if reading her thoughts, Marco's lips curved in a slight smile. I had someone keeping an eye on you, for your protection. I hope you don't mind. He'd been having her watched, protecting her even when she'd asked for space. The gesture was controlling and romantic and terrifying all at once. Jake was just leaving, Sarah said, not taking her eyes off Marco. Actually, Marco said, his tone turning cold as he focused on Jake, I think Jake and I need to have a conversation, man to man. The threat was unmistakable. Jake looked between them desperately, probably calculating his chances of escape against 3 men who clearly meant business. Sarah, Marco said gently, why don't you go upstairs? I'll be up in a few minutes. She wanted to argue, to insist that she could handle Jake herself, but the truth was, she felt safer knowing Marco was dealing with the situation. After years of fighting battles alone, it was intoxicating to have someone strong enough and willing to fight them for her. Don't hurt him, she said quietly. Marco's expression softened. I won't lay a finger on him. You have my word. Sarah nodded and headed for the elevator, though she could hear Marco's voice behind her, low and deadly. Now then, Jake, let's discuss why you're never going to bother Sarah again. 20 minutes. Later, Marco knocked on her apartment door. When Sarah opened it, he looked perfectly composed, not a hair out of place. Is Jake going to be a problem? She asked. No, Marco said simply. "He won't be bothering you again." Sarah stepped aside to let him in, noting the way he immediately moved to her kitchen to make tea, her favorite blend, which he'd started keeping at her place weeks ago. "You had me followed," she said. "Protected," Marco corrected, not sounding apologetic. "There are people in my world who might try to use you to get to me. I couldn't leave you defenseless." "You could have told me." Marco paused in his tea preparation, his shoulders tense. "Would you have agreed to it?" "I don't know, but I deserved the choice." "You're right," Marco said, turning to face her. "I'm sorry. In my world, protection is automatic for people I care about. I didn't think about how it would feel from your perspective." The apology surprised her. Jake had never apologized for anything, even when he was clearly wrong. "Marco, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Always. Have you ever killed anyone?" Marco was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful and controlled. "I've done things to protect my family and our interests. Things I'm not proud of, but don't regret. If someone threatened you, I would do whatever was necessary to keep you safe. Does that answer your question?" It did, though not in the way Sarah had expected. Marco wasn't denying the violence in his world, but he wasn't glorifying it either. He was being honest about the darkness while making it clear that his motivation was protection, not cruelty. "I should be terrified of you," Sarah said softly. "Are you?" Sarah examined her feelings carefully. Fear? No. Overwhelm at the complexity of loving someone in his position? Absolutely. But actual fear of Marco himself? None. "No," she said finally. "I should be, but I'm not. I trust you." The relief on Marco's face was palpable. He moved toward her slowly, as if afraid she might change her mind. "Sarah, I know this is a lot to accept. I know my world comes with risks and complications you never signed up for. But I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life. If you'll have me, I'll spend every day proving that you can trust me with your heart." Standing there in her ordinary apartment kitchen, looking at this extraordinary man who had turned her world upside down in the best possible way, Sarah made her choice. "I love you too," she said simply. Marco's smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms. "Say it again." "I love you, Marco Rossetti. All of you, even the dangerous parts." This time, when he kissed her, it tasted like forever. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the garden of the Rossetti family estate, wearing a wedding dress that belonged in a fairy tale, and a smile that hadn't left her face all day. The ceremony had been small but elegant, attended by Marco's large Italian family and the few friends Sarah had who were brave enough to marry into organized crime royalty. As Marco spun her around the dance floor to their wedding song, the same Italian ballad they'd danced to that first night, Sarah marveled at how much her life had changed. She'd left her marketing job to help manage the legitimate side of the Rossetti businesses, discovering she had a talent for strategy and negotiation. She'd traveled to Italy twice, finally seeing some of the world she'd always dreamed of. Most importantly, she'd learned what it felt like to be truly, completely loved. "Any regrets, Mrs. Rossetti?" Marco murmured against her ear as they swayed together. Sarah looked around at the fairy lights strung through the trees, the tables full of people celebrating their love, the man holding her like she was his most precious treasure. "Just one," she said. Marco pulled back to look at her, concern flickering in his eyes. "What?" Sarah grinned. "I regret not throwing that drink at Jake myself. Would have saved us both some time." Marco's laughter was rich and warm as he dipped her dramatically, drawing cheers from their guests. "Don't worry, Bella. I'll make sure you never have to deal with men like that again." "Promise?" "Promise," Marco said, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like champagne and happily ever after. Later, as they walked hand in hand through the garden under a canopy of stars, Sarah reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A year ago, she'd been convinced she was destined for mediocrity, with a man who made her feel worthless. Now she was married to someone who treated her like a queen, and protected her like the precious thing she'd never believed herself to be. "What are you thinking about?" Marco asked, stopping to pull her close. Just how different everything is now. How different I am. You're not different, Marco said, cupping her face in his hands. You're just finally free to be who you were always meant to be. Strong, confident, beautiful. You were all of those things before you met me. I just helped you remember. As they kissed under the starlight, Sarah knew he was right. Marco hadn't rescued her that night in the hotel ballroom. He'd simply shown her that she was worth rescuing, worth protecting, worth loving with the kind of passion she'd only read about in books. And if that love came with a little danger, a little complexity, a little walk on the wild side, well, as Marco had said that first night, the best fairy tales always did.